Delicious in Dungeon started off with having the main character's sister casually get ate, and they brushed it off like it wasn't that big of a deal. Hey, as long as we get to her within a month's time, we'll just revive the girl. No big deal. No ifs, ands, or buts. And it's like, okay, sure. But even I was still just like, you know what? I mean, that's a one-off thing. No, apparently Leos, our MC, he casually died before, maybe multiple times as far as we know, but the first time definitely was quite the shock as I wasn't expecting how brutal it would be, because really up to this point, it hasn't been savage. Like, even with the sister stuff, I never really got the impression that I was like, wow, that's really graphic. But this actually was. Not in the way that they splattered the screen with blood and went edgy, but just how casually he got stabbed by a living suit of armor, which is the main creature, really the only thing we kind of go up against in this episode. And the idea that, I'm like, okay, well, I guess, it's fine. He made it out alive, clearly, because we're following him. And I was like, yeah, that's casually how I died. He's just casually basically saying his life story, like, yeah, no big deal. Now, what's for lunch? The fact that this show can have such a D&D style campaign, and that's really what this episode felt like. And I really got that impression pretty much since they got to the wall that they obviously had to pass. Chilchuck comes in, basically says, hey, give me your sword, starts poking around until he finds the switch, and then the door opens. Like, this basically functions like your dungeon master saying, okay, hey, you reach a wall with no way to pass, what do? Okay, you roll because you want to try to find a switch with your sword. Oh, you succeeded. Pass and move up to this point. Like, that's basically what happened, and this show sealed itself as a must-watch. I've been loving it for these past 2 episodes, but I think anyone who's been missing out on maybe where more of the fantasy kind of adventuring side can go, an episode like this not only was the best episode of the 3, it took a classic fantasy monster, a living suit of armor, and turned it into something that basically was seafood to be cracked open and steamed and ate like some mussels or oysters. And I'm like, just give me more. Now, I do have a full live reaction to today's A Wonderful Delicious in Dungeon episode over on my Patreon, so if you would like to see my full link of thoughts there over there if you're interested. Now, I think this was a important episode because I think up to this point, I probably would put Leos as kind of like my least favorite of the 4, because the other 3 kind of felt like they've had more time to shine. Sure, he has his intro hook about his sister, but he kind of just seemed like a psychopath in the way that he's like, okay, she'll be fine as long as we get to her in a set amount of time, and what's for dinner? Sure, he did have the gun-ho energy of let's go save her, but I mean, he definitely felt like there was a few screws loose there. So an episode like this, I felt like, while I still think he's crazy, like he's keeping a secret that his new sword is apparently alive and a new party member. I don't know if it's going to try to be a face eater at night when they're all sleeping. Is it going to be cute and adorable? I have no damn idea, but honestly, I think that sword probably thinks that they're mating, because the whole idea was that basically these creatures pretty much like they start holding hands, and then I guess after that babies are made, because that's how anime logic works with it. Of course, I'm making jokes about hand holding, but you get my point. But the fact that he's going to be holding that sword, I'm curious if there's going to be like the creature weirdly thinks that they're connected, or if it's just going to be more of a pet dynamic. I don't know. But given the luck some of these characters have, I just assume that basically one of them is going to be viewed as like their mate, and honestly, rip to them whenever that does happen. But I loved what they did with the living creature dynamic, because I had no idea what was in those suit of armors. At first, I thought it was a spirit, and then when they start talking about eggs, I'm like, okay, slime makes the most sense. Like, what else would be inside there unless it's a skeleton of some sort or this or that? Turns out, it's really interesting because it's very like a slimy slug-like creature, but it's in between the plates. So like, when you take the helmet off, it looks like nothing's in there. But the plates that connect the helmet to be what it is, they hide in there, and they all kind of connect and hold hands in order to form the suit of armor as we see. And the idea that all the ones in the hallway, which were the basic suits of armor, it wasn't like they were stupid or they were underdeveloped. It was more so they were pretty much all just focused on protecting the queen bee, so to speak. And once we got into the main room with a much more cool suit of armor, it was just a lot more deadly. At first, I thought the reason why when after he steals the helmet away and realizes nothing's in there, that like, and like he cracks it open and everything, that maybe it was just like, oh, like maybe it needs it to be on top, but right, it has to have the helmet on in order to physically see. Like maybe it's more of like a mental link thing, but it seems like because each of the creatures kind of did a different thing, like a different action, one did the arm, one did the other arm, the chest, this and that, and because one acted as the eyes, it's really cool because they can kind of stretch and move around like that, so the other ones couldn't really see what was happening. And as we see with the sword at the end, they do have little eyes, so It was kind of a fun fight. It was something I wasn't expecting. It kept me on my toes, casually do a flashback that the first time he ever went up against these suits of armor, died and had to be revived. I have no idea how many times this has happened to him, at least once, which is one too many for most anime characters. But the fact that this is another thing that makes it feel D&D-like, because your D&D characters can come back to life, right? Like, that's the whole point about D&D and making a campaign, whether you're playing a video game inspired by D&D or you're playing a straight up D&D campaign with your friends. Like, the idea that even in death, like, I saw a video recently about this dude who's been playing the same D&D campaign for 30 years with his same group of friends. Their characters all ended up dead, and now they're in like this new, almost like parallel world with kind of like reincarnations that they're trying to revive their old characters. Like, that's kind of the brilliance of D&D, and I love how this show, it feels very D&D inspired, but with that trigger animation. And I think this was the best looking episode, hands down. Personally, I think it's gotten better looking with each episode, but this was the most trigger feeling episode. A lot of different like animation techniques. A lot of it reminded me of how they did Little Witch Academia in terms of some of the more whimsical scenes, but in general, just a banger of an episode, because episode 1 very much was still focused on the cooking more than anything, but it had an adventure side to it. Episode 2 I felt like was more focused on the cooking side and maybe like how they hunt creatures without it being necessarily like an adventuring episode. This, straight up adventuring with a slight hint of cooking. And the cooking was disgusting. Doesn't help that I don't like seafood, and that just looked like mussels, clams, oysters. It was not vibing with me. And honestly, man, I like the fact that rather than just making everything delicious from their point of view, some of the stuff turns out nasty. Like the first one that they try, they're like, yep, that tastes great. Let's try the steamed one in the nasty ass helmet. Basically vomit worthy. I love the fact that because of the equipment they use, it's going to affect the flavor. So a slug infested helmet that's been there for God knows how long is going to taste like ass. And I really enjoy that. So this is just such an amazing show. We're 3 episodes deep. I already absolutely love it. I've said it in a few different videos, but this is like one of the 3 anime for me that has hooked me in the most and is going to be competing for my anime of the season title. That's how much I enjoy it. It's such a good show. Comedy on point. The fact that you can have it where it's like you see these characters interact with their world in a realistic way. Let's not just beat down the wall because it's in our way. Sure, you can do that, but there's probably a hidden switch, and the character who finds it makes a lot of sense given that they are the trap's master, or the fact that, hey, let's give casual backstory. We already know characters can apparently die and be digested and it's still not the end of the world. Let's just stab our main character and say that's how he first died. No big deal. And hey, let's have some oysters as we have this really cool combat scene. The show's amazing. Now, of course, those are my feelings. I'm loving Delicious in Dungeon. I think it's a banger. I think it's going to be one of Trigger's masterpieces for sure, but let me know what you're feeling down below. I heard a lot of people say like this was like the point for them that this really became a special manga for them, so let me know how you're feeling, especially if you're anime only. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course ring that bell so you get notified when I upload more, and hey, like I mentioned, we have a full live reaction over on Patreon, and while you're over there, you also get a video shout out. Alright, so today we have Pranay Sumshwar, Darian Smith, Raj Mullins, and Diedrich Savant. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.